Manifesto of the Städtliches Bauhaus, Walter Gropius, April 1919. Das Endziel aller bildnerischen Tätigkeit ist der Bau.
The ultimate goal of all art is the building. In Portuguese now.
O último gol de toda arte é o edifício.
Krajnji cilj čitave umetnosti je zgrada.
Неописуемая цель всех искусств – это построение.
The ultimate goal of all art is the building. The ornamentation of the building was once the main purpose of the visual arts, and they were considered indispensable parts of the great building. Today they exist in complacent isolation from which they can only be salvaged by the purposeful and cooperative endeavours of all artisans. This is the manifesto, the 100th anniversary of it. May I read that again?
Manifesto of the Städtliches Bauhaus from Walter Gropius, April 1919.
100 years ago. The beginning of the international style.
Architects, painters and sculptors must learn a new way of seeing and understanding the composite character of the building, both as a totality and in terms of its parts. Their work will then re-imbue itself with the spirit of architecture, which it lost in salon art.
Lost. The art schools of old were incapable of producing this unity, and how could they? For art may not be taught. They must return to the workshop. The world of mere drawing and painting, of draftsmen and applied artists, must at long last become a world that builds.
When a young person who senses within himself a love for creative endeavour begins his career, as in the past, by learning a trade, the unproductive artist will no longer be condemned to the imperfect practice of art, because his skill is now preserved in craftsmanship, where he may achieve excellence.
Architects, sculptors, painters, we must all return to craftsmanship, for there is no such thing as art by profession. There is no essential difference between the artist and the artisan. The artist is the exalted artisan. Merciful heaven, in rare moments of illumination beyond man's will, may allow art to blossom from the work of his hand, but the foundations of proficiency are indispensable to every artist. This is the original source of creative design.
So let us therefore create a new guild of craftsmen, free of the divisive class pretensions that endeavour to raise a prideful barrier between craftsmen and artists.
Let us strive for, conceive and create the new building of the future that will unite every discipline, architecture and sculpture and painting, and which will one day rise heavenwards from the million hands of craftsmen as a clear symbol of a new belief to come.
Does this manifesto mean anything anymore to this generation of students? Does it mean anything at the AA? I wonder. If not, what is their new manifesto? Okay.
And then we do it anyway.
Question. Can I keep one?
Yes. Yeah.
Can I also keep one? Yeah. You keep the last one.
Thanks, Dave.
I think the first question was, yes, what do these words mean to you?
Yeah.
Because I haven't brought the original thing in. No, you're right. Sorry. So what do they mean to you? And is there any reference to the Futurist Cookbook? You know that.
There is a little bit about the Futurist Cookbook. I do like the Futurist Cookbook. I always thought the Futurist Cookbook worked more as at least to me, it worked better as a fiction.
Yes.
Like it was somehow more powerful as a fiction. I think it didn't need to be a manifesto in that sense. But yeah, I liked it as a fiction. But fibrousness to me meant this idea of arrangement.
Yes.
You know, like fibers are always arranged in a certain way, and when the fibers are arranged a certain way, they then result in a kind of like bigger structure.
Yes.
And that's where the sticks came about. I mean, you know, it could easily be like components, or it could easily be, what do you call it?
So these are your fibers?
These are the fibers, and depending on how they have to relate to each other, you know what I mean? They can just lie singular, but they don't do very much when they're singular. It's in their composition, in their interrelation, that they become something else.
But in terms of your words, is this chewy and that's fibrous?
Yeah.
Or is what?
I mean, I think we were talking about this during my. No, this is fibrous. Yeah. This is chewy, and what we're sitting on is tender.
I see.
Yeah, but I think like at the end of the day, it's not that only is chewy or that only is fibrous. I think they each have, like, instead of trying to categorize things in terms of material, in terms of trying to categorize things in terms of any other way or like context, what I was trying to do was kind of categorize them according to their qualities or their characteristics.
Yes.
I guess. So, like, you know, chewy obviously has some reference to a fiber structure because it's kind of this little foam, and there are these kind of like holes and this kind of network of holes that kind of creates its chewiness.
Yes.
And fibrous in a way like has none of the elasticity of chewiness, but it does follow other principles of chewiness, which is like, for me, chewiness has to do with this idea of the more you chew it, the more flavor comes out.
Yes.
The more you step on it, the more you learn about the different textures and the patterns. And fibrous is like that as well. Like the more we use it, the more compositions, the more kind of arrangements we found, be it from this kind of like very kind of minimal boundary or a little bit of seating to like a massive wall which Molly built, for example, or the kind of like seating arrangement that Daria made.
Yes.
Yeah, so in that sense, to me, it's also chewy in that, you know, you can chew the fat, as it were.
Yes.
And like get more out of it as the more you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I seem to remember there was a technical study once done on the future of chewing gum as a sort of a building material. So you're sort of imagining a building site full of people chewing gum and then sticking it up to get things in place.
Yeah.
But
it's about accumulation, that, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I think that maybe is not so much about the chewing gum, it's about the stickiness of that chewing gum. And they're quite, you know, there's something quite nice about that stickiness that then...
In the Futurist Cookbook, it says the use of perfumes to enhance the tasting experience. And it also says something, the abolition of the knife and fork. What is there any implication of abolishing something by using these words in connection with architecture? Because they're not normally used in an architectural context, are they? I've never heard a critic called a building chewable, for instance.
Yeah. I think,
but
like
fibrous is very architectural.
Fibrous could be, yeah. Because fibrous does refer to kind of some kind of structure.
Yeah.
And but I think like maybe not an abolition of something, but kind of like expanding the kind of possible like language that is used to describe architecture. Because why limit it to, you know, tectonics or whatever they use nowadays, or dialectic or whatever they use nowadays, because that already is an expansion. I was reading this thing about how like there's no inherent or original architectural theory, and everything is derived from other theories.
Yes.
Everything architectural is always borrowed.
Yes.
In a way, because I think the idea was that because architecture is everything in a sense, that it can't afford to have its own independent theory. Its theories are always dependent on what it's housing. And yeah, so like wine, I don't mean housing food or housing whatever. I mean housing our sense of taste. Yeah.
So, do you think that you might put this into? You're going to make a film about these different categories. Is that what you're going to do next?
I think before I make a film about the different categories, I need to figure out what the categories are. Like, this is the first kind of initial foray into what I'm calling tasty textures.
Yes.
Just because the textures, I think, are easier to align with kind of a structural, formal architecture. But I would love to find, like a sweet architecture, or bitter architecture, or sour architecture, or savory architecture, or like a rich architecture, like a rich aroma, or to go into like floral notes and stuff like that, stuff which is harder to conceivably relate to a structural architecture.
Do these words relate to this facade that we're looking at? Can I be as direct and sort of simple-minded as that is a very chewy facade, or it lacks fibrousness? Or
I think it absolutely can be, but I think what it needs is use. It needs us to use that language and to kind of create those associations. And part of it is that if you use something enough, I mean, it's like, if you say something enough, it becomes real whether you like it or not.
And did you use these words at your recent table?
I did, yeah. I mean, I tried to leave it, I tried to be quite casual about it, like as if it wasn't a big deal.
Yes.
Like achieving a crisp relationship between, two pieces of that kind of stuff, but not just as describing the piece, but also describing the relationship between pieces. Yeah. Expanding that vocabulary.
I think the last question we had was about music, wasn't it? Where the song titles that include the word chewy and fibrous.
Yeah.
Can you think of one?
I don't know any chewy songs.
No.
I feel like there should be some.
Yes, it sounds as though there should.
But fibrous maybe is a bit clumsy to be used in a song.
Yes.
Because the word fibrous is too much of a mouthful.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice interview.
It's now June the 4th.
4th, yes.
In Bedford Square.
Yes.
The penultimate session of chewy, fibrous, tender,
crispy, unctuous
architecture. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, David.